Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for that. What an excellent reminder. Kids, all children up through 6th grade are welcome to attend children's church at this time. Brother Jeremiah is back there. Good. I haven't heard that song in such a long time. Just what a reminder. It's the necessity of troubles. It's the necessity of troubles. All right, we're going to be in Genesis 39 is where we're starting out this morning. And I'm going to be going through, I had announced it Wednesday. I know some of you were not this, but I announced that we're going to be making a slight change on our schedule of preaching. And basically what that means is I've been going through the book of Luke on Sunday mornings, and I'll be moving that to Sunday night. And we're going to go through a time where we're going through the life of Joseph. And anyways, I say last Sunday when we talked about just what he went through. Crazy background. I mean, just absolute crazy background as far as who he was. Sometimes we think that, well, the reason Joseph did so well is because he just had everything going for him. And that's why once he was in a tough situation with all that privilege and all that stuff that he was given, then he did well. That's not the case at all. He excelled, and one of the things we're going to find in that is simply because Joseph loved God. That made a difference. And it's not just that he loved him superficially. Oftentimes we think love is no more than an expressed emotion, and that's pretty much it. And obviously it's far more than that. And so we're going to look at that. Primarily the topic that we're going to look at this morning is temptation. Temptation is one of those things that oftentimes we shy away from. I hear people say things like, well, temptation is only temptation. It's only sinful if you act on your temptation. But do you realize that your temptation itself can be sinful? Not that the presence of a temptation arriving there is sinful, but more so what happens in that temptation. If you would abide in that, your mind would stay on that. But anyways, we're going to look at Genesis 39, and once again, looking at the life of Joseph. Incredible man, a lot of scriptures dealing with his life. And anyways, a random story takes place, by the way, in Genesis 38. In fact, I said 39. I think it'd be wise if we started in 38, just so you can get some background into this, because we're looking at two parallel stories and two very different directions that take place. Joseph has a bunch of brothers. He has 11 brothers to be exact, and of his 11 brothers that are the one that the line of Christ is going to go through. Remember that there was a covenant promise made to Abraham. Now, that's a couple generations previous to Genesis 38. So Abraham is promised a seed blessing, and that from the seed, the blessing to the whole world is going to come from. The Messiah has what we would describe as an unbroken line from Jesus Christ all the way to Abraham. So Abraham has children. He has several children. And anyways, the first two are Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael was not the son of promise. He tried to do that by the works of the flesh and said, I'm going to figure out how to have my own kid. And he ends up impregnating the handmaiden of his wife, Sarah. And anyways, God says, no, that's not the one. It's going to be Isaac. God's going to bring the Messiah through Isaac. So anyways, from Isaac is going to have kids as well. And from Isaac has certain children. Does anybody know their names? What's Isaac's kids' names? Bible trivia time. Jacob and Esau. We have Jacob and Esau. That would have been quite a pair. I've seen a lot of siblings get together well. I'm curious whether or not Jacob and Esau got together well. I mean, there's times that Jacob's tricking him, and it tells us of a couple of times that Jacob tricks him and just tries to really manipulates the situation, get what he wants. And I'm wondering how often that happened. I'm guessing God's not like, well, there was these 2 times, and the only 2 times they ever didn't get along. I'm guessing it was more than that. But anyways, they weren't necessarily getting along, and Jacob stole some things like the birthright and the blessing from dad and stuff like that. But ultimately, God had a greater plan that he was going to use that for the line of Christ to go through Jacob. Jacob then has children. Jacob's name Israel, and that's where we get the name Israelite, or the nation of Israel, from descendants of Israel. And anyways, when it comes to this, Israel kind of breaks the mold and has a whole bunch of kids. And anyways, he's got 12 boys, and from a couple different women. And anyways, Joseph and Benjamin are the favorites. Joseph by far at some point, until Benjamin later on is kind of the protected last child. And anyways, that being said, Joseph has some great difficulty, but he has brothers that are not very good. In fact, a few chapters back in 34, they have a situation where their sister goes out, and we're not going to look at that. You're welcome to look at that, but the Bible describes in chapter 34 what she does, that she goes to spend some time with the women of the land, so to go look at them. Now, it wasn't just like, oh, I want to see them. The idea is like she's going out with her friends that are in the land. Now, the problem is that they're in Canaan land. And Canaan is an incredibly wicked area. The Bible makes it abundantly clear. The wickedness of Canaan is something that should not be present in the children of God. And there's a great deal of wickedness and immorality, and a lot of stuff's taking place. So she's hanging out with her friends. And as she's hanging out with her friends, she gets caught up with the guy who's a prince, woos her. For a long time, I thought that she had been raped. But as you look at the text, the way it describes is that he fell in love with her. And spending some time with her, that she loses her honor. And so she ends up, I'm just going to say, she slept with him before marriage. And so because of that, they fall in love more and they want to get married. And the point is there's a lot that had taken place in that time frame, and she didn't do right. She's hanging out with the wrong people in areas that she shouldn't be, falls into sin, and the story gets crazier from there. You should read it, or just read it. I won't do a spoiler alert for you on that one. I won't give you a spoiler on that one. But chapter number 38 gets to where we're at now, and now we're going to talk about another one. That was Dinah was Judah's sibling, but then we look down here, Jacob's sibling, Judah's sibling. Look down at Judah here. Judah is one of Joseph's brothers. And Judah is actually the fourth born, and so he's number 4. And if we look at verse number 1, it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned to a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. Now, as far as that goes, it's important to note what happens here. Kind of like Dinah, where she goes to hang out with the girls from the land, so some of the people that were there. Very, very wicked pagan people that were doing a lot of really awful things. He goes and he leaves his brethren, so the area where his family's occupying, and they go to another area, and he's going to work with some of the Canaanites, and he makes a friend when he gets out there. And by the way, when you look at this chapter, it's going to seem like Hira is a really good friend. I mean, he's there for him. He's there to fulfill the needs. If you need something, I'll take care of it, and we need to restore your honor. Why don't you go take care of this? And Hira seems to be working for him and being a friend there. And by the way, this is not going to be a good thing. In verse number 2, and Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Now, is that he gets married and he marries a Canaanite. You might think, well, what's the big deal about a Canaanite? Now, some people will draw a lot of false doctrines from passages like this in Genesis, where or even with the even with Abraham when he wants his son to get married, and likewise Jacob or Isaac when he wants his sons to be married. What they do is they don't marry some of the local girls. What they do is go to a different place, and the reason for that the Bible describes it has to do with the wickedness of Canaan. Canaan is just steeped in idolatry and immorality. It's just a wicked place. And he's talking about, and basically any time they get caught up with the people of the land, they get into trouble. That's just what happens. So, in fact, what's going to be happening in 39, God's preparing the way for them to leave from that land and go to Egypt. You might say, well, Egypt, isn't that just as bad? Well, it is, and it's very wicked, except in Egypt, they're going to have a place set aside for them, a land called Goshen, where these shepherds can go live. And so they kind of have an area where they can preserve those things. So, anyways, in this, he now finds a Canaanite woman, and he falls in love with her. And so they have a son, and by the way, they're going to have 3 sons. Verse number 4, she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. In verse 5, and she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. So how many sons so far? 3 sons. So a lot of tragedy is going to befall the family. And by the way, when you think of tragedy, think about what's taking place. He has married somebody that he should not have. Why? Because they're wicked. It's not just because, well, we don't like Canaanites. It has nothing to do with that. What God is telling them, there's specific instruction that they are not supposed to marry certain people for a reason. And that has to do with the purity, not for the sake of a pure bloodline, but literally for the sake of sin not being present there. And so anyways, they have these 3 sons together. Not much is mentioned about her, except for the fact that she's the daughter of Shua. That's all we know about her. And have these 3 kids. And anyways, in verse number 6, and Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. Tamar, we find a few things about her within the Scriptures, except for there's not much in detail in regards to who she really was, except for we know where he's at. He's in Canaan. And being in Canaan areas, around the Canaanites, the Adulamites, what we have here is that that this person, he selects for his son. Now, this is different, because Isaac wanted his son to have a good daughter, and so he said, people away. Like, go find them in this land. Abraham wants Isaac to have a good wife, so go send away for this land. Because we know this is very important that we protect marriage. And this is important, by the way, right? The Bible tells us to not be unequally yoked together. And so they understand the principle back in the book of Genesis. And this time, he's where he's working, and he finds a girl and says, all right, you're going to marry her. And I don't know all the details. I don't know if it was a transactional history. I don't know what's happened. But the point is that, in other words, like a business history. I don't know what's happened, but the point is that he gets married. In this, the Bible describes What do we know about This is the only thing we know about besides the fact he's the son of Judah. In verse number 7, and Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord slew him. So he died. God killed him. And Judah said unto Onan, go unto thy brother's wife, marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And I'll just read it here. And it came to pass when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, and lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Now, what takes place, you might look at that and you're like, okay, that's a really weird passage of Scripture. That's not a normal Sunday morning passage of Scripture. Isn't that something like you would do on a Wednesday night Bible study or that Friday Bible study nobody knows about? So that's generally not one that you hear. Typically, we don't headline, and this is what happened. We don't quote the Scripture. Generally, we're not going to put that in our bulletin, like this is the verse we want to memorize for the week. But here's the thing. What he's describing is actually very odd to us, but something very common back then. In the book of Deuteronomy, I think chapter 25, verses 1 through 10, it describes what we would call a levirate marriage. Now, it has nothing to do with the tribe of Levi. The word levirate literally is a Latin word having to do with the brother-in-law, so the marriage of the brother-in-law. So what she did when her wicked husband died, in order to preserve his seed, in other words, that somebody would carry on his name, she would then marry the next brother or her brother-in-law. And when they would join together, the first child born to them would be, if we could say it this way, donated or given to the brother's memory, carrying on that name. And so that name would continue on. The book of Deuteronomy preserved that practice for the sake of the inheritance of the land. Now, we don't practice that today, and there's a lot of reasons why. But when we look at that to us, that may be very odd, but it was right. They were supposed to do that. And not only that, the father, Judah, said, do this. This is what's required of you. If this is something that's going to happen, we have to make sure we're doing the right thing. Well, Onan says no, and so he's willing then to bear the physical relationship, but he sure didn't want the responsibility of having a son that he wouldn't get to have his own. And so he does not fulfill his responsibility, and God says he's wicked and kills him. So 2 dead. Now, how many sons did Judah have? 3. Now, how many sons are alive? 1. Now, this next one is young. This next one is young, and so young that it says, all right, we're going to wait till he's a little bit older. In fact, look at verse number 11. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house. Notice what he's saying there. We're not going to take care of you. Yeah, you're in our family. We brought you in. But you go back home. By the way, what would have been right is that their family took care of her. But he sends her back home. And till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die, also as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now, looking at this, what you find is that it seems to reference, and it gives some kind of clue here, that he's blaming Tamar for this. And how do we know this? Well, because he says, well, we're going to wait until he's a little bit older, just in case he might die as well when stuff happens. And so it's not because they're wicked, it's because the whole situation with Tamar. And so the wickedness is Tamar's fault? Well, we're going to send her away in the meantime. And so there seems to be something going on. They have a responsibility. They're not fulfilling their responsibility. Tamar's thinking, I want to fulfill my responsibility to bear a child for the preservation of this bloodline. And so it's very important to them. And so this is something they're doing, but they're sending her away. Well, what's going to take place, and I won't read the whole text, but what takes place is during that time, Judah goes to this area where she's at, and in that area, she puts on some clothing that would make it obvious that she was a harlot, the one that would sell her body for income. And so anyways, what ends up happening is when he sees her, he asks her basically transactionally, how much is this going to cost? I'll give you a kid, not literally a child. I'm going to give you a lamb. I'm going to give you one of these little baby sheep. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Well, you don't have it with you, so what are you going to give me? And so she asks for his signet, his ring, his staff, something that definitely, this is Judah. And so what happens is that adultery, that immorality occurs there. It's wicked. There's no question. It's an incredibly wicked chapter, the things that are going on here. But she goes back home. She puts on her garments of mourning because she's mourning the loss of her husband. And Judah goes back home. Eventually, Judah is going to send his buddy, Hira. He's going to send him back, and Hira is going to bring this payment and in order to collect the items. And so he goes there and looks for her. What the Bible describes in this passage is that he can't even find her. He asks the people around there, all right, where is she? Wasn't there a harlot that was around here? And they said, we have no harlot here. So even them, they're like, no way. We don't have that kind of person around us. And so anyways, can't find her. So ultimately, we have a few months later, several months later, you have knowledge that's found out that she is pregnant. Now, catch what's happened. Judah has said that that it would be okay, basically by his practice, it's okay for him to be with his harlot. Then he finds out that his former daughter-in-law is pregnant, and they say it's because she had played the harlot. In other words, she has been a prostitute, and that's how she got pregnant. And he's enraged, has her brought forward, and basically, whose is this? How dare you? What a wicked thing. And so she says, well, whoever these are is whose the baby is, and it's his ring and signet and staff. And so, all right, that's the baby's. That's the baby's dad. And Judah realizes, that was my fault. That was me. And what the Bible describes, if you notice down to verse number 26, and Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son, and he knew her again no more. Now, we understand this had been a one-time event already, but what we have here in this circumstance is that he's saying, all right, he's not taking her on as a wife. And Shelah, by the way, the next son wasn't given, which means, by the way, Shelah wasn't like a 12-year-old boy. He was an adult. We're just going to wait a little while is what he's saying. And anyway, so he didn't fulfill his responsibility. He says about her, she was more righteous. Now, this is not saying what she did was righteous. But he is saying that she had a more righteous mindset, at least in some ways. Now, Judah's messed up. So I'm not saying like, well, this is what you should accomplish. This is the way you should do things. But he's addressing certain things, and that there was a responsibility, and he didn't do the responsibility he had. Now, you look at chapter 38, and you're like, this is a weird chapter, Pastor. Now, why is it weird? Because it's kind of a weird spot for it, isn't it? If you look at chapter 38 in context of where we're at, we already saw Joseph back in chapter 37, who has been sold into slavery by his brothers, which would have included Judah in that number. And he had gotten some dreams that told him what was going to happen in the future as far as his role and responsibility. And they didn't like him. And then, by the way, this whole story in 38 about Judah, and then back to chapter 39 about Joseph. And then the rest is going to be about Joseph. And you might think, well, this is kind of a weird spot. There's a lot of commentators, if you read commentators, that will tell you that this is just randomly inserted. It has nothing to do with the story. This has everything to do with the story. This is actually incredibly important. There's a lot of stuff there. In fact, on a prophetic level, there's a great deal because of the children she'll have. In fact, she's going to have 2 kids. The ones that she's pregnant with is twins. And really, really, really neat story. And I would love to just preach a whole message on that. I won't. But she is going to have 2 children. And the children, one of them, Pharez, is going to be in the line of Christ. And so even through all this, and the way it seems like there's no hope in it, God uses it to bring out something good. But what I want you to draw from is this, that Judah goes into a life that is quite sinful. Judah goes into certain things that from one thing it goes worse and worse and worse and worse. It started with one thing. He went into an area that he shouldn't have gone. That Bible makes it very clear. There's multiple occasions that kind of thing happens. In fact, another time that happens is over in the book of Ruth, when one guy who's married says, let's get out of here and go over to, let's leave Bethel and go to Moab. And so they go to a land they shouldn't go. Their sons end up getting married, but the sons died, the husband died, and so all these women are now widows. And they're going through just a terrible time, but from that we see another woman named Ruth, who is likewise going to be brought into the line of Christ. Just through the most odd circumstances, God puts those pieces together of really shattered fragments and puts it into this perfect and beautiful puzzle that God puts together for bringing Jesus Christ the Messiah in. And it's pretty remarkable. But that sounds good in the distance. In the meantime, Judah has been living in sin. Judah went where he shouldn't have. He married where he shouldn't have gotten into this relationship. He assigns a wife to his son who is wicked, and in that she's also from outside of where she should have been. And so anyways, things are going badly because of circumstance. By the way, in the meantime, you notice he had a friend. He made a friend in that area. And this friend is helping him along. The friend is what brings the payment. The friend is the one that tries to collect the stuff and to save his honor. And he's assisting him. Back in chapter 34, Dinah had her friends. And she met a prince. And she's out of where she's supposed to. And you look at chapter 34, and you look at chapter 38, and it seems like circumstances are definitely not in their favor. But you'll notice that they place themselves in those circumstances. And when they placed themselves in those circumstances, they played with sin, and they got burnt. They created problems. This is the story. But then we have somebody else that's in really bad circumstances. Look at chapter number 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. Remember, why is he in the hand of the Ishmaelites? Why do the Ishmaelites have ownership over Joseph? Because his brothers sold him. I couldn't imagine being just sold into slavery. Imagine a nation comes in today and we're all sold into slavery. That would be terrible. Wouldn't it be more terrible if your brothers were the ones that sold you? I couldn't imagine. And this is the pain, not just the difficulty he's going through, but literally the betrayal of his own family that took place for him to endure these things. But in verse number 2, and the Lord was with Joseph. And here's the key to what's going to happen with Joseph, is that the Lord is with him. In fact, we'll find this later again in verse number 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy. In spite of what's going on, God is with him. So the question I would have then, okay, well, Joseph then has an advantage, and that's that the Lord is with him. Whereas Judah and Dinah, they're in places, why doesn't it say the Lord is with them? And here's why. Because Joseph went in the circumstances. Were they bad circumstances? Yes. But that he was brought into where you have Dinah and you have Judah that are in circumstances that they placed themselves into. And so they chose different paths that brought them into places of destruction that they themselves carried themselves into. And so anyways, they're in the circumstances, so it's two very different things. Now, with this, now we still have temptation. It doesn't mean it's too late for Judah once he moved there to Canaan. No. How about Dinah when she's hanging out with her friends down in the area of the land? No. But here's what happens. In verse number 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And I'm losing my voice a little bit, so let me take a swig here. Excuse me. All right, that's better. All right, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. So now Joseph has this new job. Now he's been carried away. He was 17 years old back in chapter 37. By the time we're going to get to chapter 43, it's going to be some 13 or 17 years later. So 11 years later. So there's a time period of about 11 years where he's going to be chapter 39. And so he's there, he's working for some time, and he's got a lot of responsibility. He's got a great job. Now he's overseeing one of the most prominent people in Egypt. He's seeing their property and their household, which was a big deal, by the way. For instance, if you want groceries, what do? Well, you go to the grocery store, you buy the groceries, you scan something made out of plastic, maybe. In fact, some of y'all, you'll take your phone or your watch or something and just kind of get it close and it pays it. Some people are like paying it on their phones without even going to the register, and they just walk out. It's done. In fact, I've seen some places in Europe where you can go to stores that you're like registered in, and you grab your stuff and you just literally walk out and it just automatically charges you. I don't know that I want that. But the point is that they have all these things. It's really easy for us. And in fact, you can buy stuff on Amazon and it just gets there. But back then, if you have a big household, you have a lot of people cooking your food. You have a lot of people that are serving to maintain your household. You don't just hire a painter. You have painters that live there. You have a crew that works there. You have plumbers. I mean, you have a lot of people that are working there. They're tending to his horses. They're tending to his animals. They're tending to his family. And then they have people that are tending to the family members' attendance. And so there's a lot of people. So it took a lot of work. Not only that, the household would have worked kind of like a business where he's maintaining and managing, making sure it's prosperous. And so when they're growing stuff, they're selling it, making sure those things are taken care of. It's a lot of work. And Joseph is the predominant one who's in charge of everything. He's the one with the great position. And so anyways, in verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat. What belongs to me? Well, that you're eating, that just trust me, just eat it. It's taken care of. All your finances are in good order. And so they knew Joseph was well favored. He's a goodly person. But then something happens, verse number 7. Notice the circumstance was different than his family. In verse 7, and it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Now, this is not literally meaning go lay down, but literally what she's asking for is for an involvement physically. And I'm saying this for the sake of children here, but that there would be a physical relationship of intimacy between them. In verse number 8, but he refused. Notice what he said. He refused. In fact, it doesn't say how he said it, but he refused. The way he's going to say it later, he says, and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. And so in the middle of this temptation, he says no. He refused it. He explains about his responsibility, what he's been given, and he says absolutely not. He cannot do this. Verse number 9, there is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? It came to pass, as she spake to Joseph, notice what it says next, and she spake to Joseph, what's the next three words? Day by day. Can you say that with me? Day by day. Do temptations come and go and you never have the temptation ever again? That's not how it works, is it? The devil tempted Christ in the wilderness, we know about at least 3 times, but he says he's tempted the devil 40 days. He goes for a season, which means he continued to tempt him. And so there's time periods where we understand there may be times where you have temptation and you have victory over it, but it's day by day. This temptation came day by day. That he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. The concept here is even spending time with her, he wouldn't do so. It wasn't just to lie as it mentions, to lie with her, but to be with her. And he's addressing the physical nature of that. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house therewithin. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard, that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. The Bible describes that she holds on to his garments until the Lord, till Potiphar comes home. And in other words, she gives this spiel again to Potiphar and says, look what he has done, and shames him for what's taken place. Joseph ends up getting thrown into prison. But here's the thing. With all of those things, Dinah did what she wanted to. Judah did what he wanted to. And yet, Joseph is not doing. Now, the point in this is not just the fact that there is a temptation. But Joseph, you have to remember, is a 17-year-old when he leaves his homeland. He arrives into Egypt, going through what he's gone through, and now given a lot of opportunity and prestige even in his household, and he's being tempted by somebody who's making it tempting. There's a concept here, and there's a lot of speculation about what she would have been like. I don't think he's saying, no, you're ugly, I don't want anything to do with you. That's not the concept here. The concept here is that there is a temptation that's present there. And in this temptation, what she's saying to him is constantly to make this happen, and here's why. The husband's not home, because we're all alone, and nobody will know. And so she makes all sorts of advances to him, and he still does not give in. Now, I'll be honest, when you look at this, you might think, okay, well, yeah, I would do the same thing, but here's what we do know. In our society, do you realize that over 50% of marriages, not just acknowledge it, but literally they are, not just that it happens, but they are literally acknowledging the fact that over 50% of our marriages will have infidelity within the marriage. And I'm sorry, I'm stumbling a lot today. The concept here is this, that infidelity is prevalent everywhere, including within our churches. I can't tell you the number of stories that I have known in the time that I have been a pastor, that pastors have gone off and run off with secretaries and with church organists and all sorts of stuff where you see this type of thing taking place, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. In fact, the reason I became a pastor at the time that I did was because the pastor of our church had been off with one of the deacons' wives. And so this is constant. We had a pastor's fellowship that took place, I think, 2 years ago. And the pastor was saying then that the reason he's in ministry was the place he was serving was because of infidelity. And the church he was pastoring before was then because of infidelity. It's commonplace. It's all over the place. And we say, well, I'll be fine. In fact, we kind of have the Adam and Eve mentality. Well, if I was in the garden, I wouldn't have picked the fruits. Well, yes, you would have. You see, the idea of temptation is that it's tailor-made for you. And in this place, there's a temptation that's there because it's tailor-made for Joseph. He's a guy, he's single, he's prominent, no doubt good-looking, he's goodly is what he describes him as. And the wife is attracted to him. And what God is saying is this is wrong.
and so he doesn't give in to temptation. I love that God puts chapter 39 next to chapter 38. Judah pursues something in a very different way. The circumstances, the friends, and the responsibilities, neglects them all. Joseph goes in, he accepts the circumstances in what he's supposed to do. Does he run away from it? No. God put him in a certain circumstance, and what he did is he stayed with it. He worked hard. What did Judah do? Judah went to a place he shouldn't have, and in those circumstances, he didn't make it right. He did. Joseph did. He got the circumstance, and he worked hard. That was his job. With that, he made friends. What was his friends? Well, it doesn't say. Who are his friends? Well, we know who his friends are. In verse number 2, and the Lord was with him. In verse number 3, the master saw that the Lord was with him. The Lord made all that he did to prosper. Verse 21, the Lord was with him. Who was Joseph's friend? It was the Lord. God was his companion in all this. And Judah sought out people from the land. Dinah sought out people from the land. And what we have here is that Joseph sought God. Why is the Lord with him? Because Joseph was with the Lord. If you don't want to fall into temptation, here's what has to happen. You have to be with the Lord. You might say, well, the Lord is with me. Yes, if you're saved, the Bible describes that he will always be with you. But how often are we away from him that we cannot say we're together? I think of my children. My children will forever be my children, but there's times that they don't want to be. And even as little ones are like, oh, I wish we could do this or that. Well, no, in our family we don't. My kids, in their ages, already young, my 5-year-old told me not too long ago, said, well, yeah, but they get to do that. Well, we're not they. We do things in a different way because this is our family. And likewise, when it comes to God, God has certain restrictions and parameters, and what God says in regards to temptation and our temperance is there are things that we don't do. Oftentimes we think of Christianity as being something, just big list of do's and don'ts, and we so frequently try to fight against that idea that we forget that there's a big list of do's and don'ts. When it comes to temperance, when you think about adding to your faith in 2 Peter chapter 1, it says, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness. The terms temperance and godliness would be kind of contrasting in the sense that temperance means that there are things that we don't do even when it's really tough to do. There are things that when you have challenges and you have a sort of temptation that arrives there, you don't do it. As Christians, we don't do them. There are godly things you should do. But when it comes to temptation, we're given in way too easy. We're falling into the snare of the devil. We are taking on the darts of the wicked, and it's commonplace where Christians are being brought low by sin, and we are just used to it. It's just the way we are. We cannot give in. But if the Lord is with you, you can. You can. Notice a couple of things, and I'll be done. Number 1, he had immediate refusal. When she offers him the first time, when she makes this offer the first time, in verse number 7, Verse 8 says, but he refused. This is resolute. This isn't something he's going to play with. This isn't something that he's going to flirt around with as long as nothing bad happens. He says, no, absolutely no way. I'm not going to allow any of this to be in my life. There's an immediate refusal. I think oftentimes we play with sin, hoping that if it's just a little bit, we'll be fine. And unfortunately, what many of us do will bring ourselves to the point where we're one step away from our failure, and we don't put up any parameters that allow us to stay safe. And we're so close that if we would make the smallest decision in the wrong direction, you will fail. You see this over and over again. And so what he says is no, he's resolute on this. Can I encourage you as Christians to be resolute, to be decisive? There are absolutely things that you do not do. Things that are not present in your home, words that you don't say, things you don't watch. These are very, very, very important. We have to maintain a strong standard. We have to stay away from it. Let me encourage you when it comes to our workplaces and addressing what he's talking about here, immorality, be very careful with people of the opposite gender. Unfortunately, even in our society, be careful with people of your own gender. I warn you about this one because oftentimes we talk about the sodomites of our land. In fact, we're in the end of June, and it's irritating as far as all that kind of stuff that you see everywhere. But the reality of it is the people we should be warning is us. Because in this, the sodomites would desire to sift you and to destroy you and have your children themselves fall in. None of that stuff has any place in your homes. We don't want any around our children whatsoever because they need to be protected from it. Encourage them to stay away from those things. And when we think about immorality, we think about relationships with other people, be very careful. Be careful with the people that you're around. Avoid being alone with other women. Men, avoid being alone with other women. Well, I have to. You know, it's me and my secretary. We have to work closely together all the time by ourselves. Listen, that's a dangerous spot. That's a very dangerous spot, something that you should be avoiding. When we consider him, we understand Joseph couldn't do anything about being alone. Remember, if you're alone with the person of the opposite gender, it doesn't mean that you've committed a transgression against God. But you have removed an area of safety. Joseph was not sinning because he was alone with Potiphar's wife. But he was ready then for the circumstances that would come up with it, even to the point that he would lose his job and be threatened with death, being put in prison. Immediate refusal. Let me encourage you, when it comes to this, when we look at sin and the way it's described, especially in the New Testament, he explains to us to flee, run away, get out of there as quickly as you can. This ought not to be present in your life whatsoever. When you allow the entrance of sin in there for a little while, it's going to open up to more. The longer that you refuse, the harder it's going to be to say no. And the longer you refuse, the longer you resist refusing, the longer and more things are going to be brought in to try to tempt you. Number 2, identify your responsibility. When he refuses, what he does in that refusal, he says, "Behold, my master wotteth not." Verse 8, "What is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand." He's saying, look, I have a responsibility. Right now in this job, I can't give in to temptation because look at my responsibility. And we need to get to the point where we're identifying what our responsibilities are. One of the best things, honestly, when you look at the book of Proverbs, is that the book of Proverbs warns you of consequences. We need to remember consequences. Consequences like the fact that sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth what? Death. Sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. That's what we know. Now, if that's the case, then that consequence is a pretty important one. Oftentimes, we'll lie to ourselves, no, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be that bad. It wouldn't be a big deal. But you have to remember, you have a responsibility. I'm reminded frequently when it comes to my gospel witness. I think of Job and what Job encouraged Job. When Job was being tempted and tried, and through all those things, people were trying to accuse him. Well, maybe you're not walking right enough with God. What encouraged Job was the fact that, behold, he will see his Redeemer face to face. That's going to be what's happening. So what's the encouragement? What's the responsibility? I'm going to see Jesus. That's an important thing. We think about our families. Listen, it's not worth it. There's no sin that's worth you losing your family over. There's no sin that's worth you losing your testimony for Jesus Christ. No sin worth you losing your job as a minister of the gospel. It's not worth it. And yet, we will fall into it thinking that sin, it is okay for a season. You've been given a lot. Look at the internal reverence that he has in verse number 9, "There's none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee. Because thou art his wife, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" He says, because you're his wife, this would be a great wickedness. Now, I would think if it wasn't his wife, he would still address that it's wicked, but he points out that you are his wife. I mean, this is terribly wicked because you're his wife. In fact, that marriage relationship is holy before God. You may say, oh, they're a bunch of pagans in Egypt. No. This matters to God, and so I can't do this wickedness. And not only can I not do it because it's wicked, but it's before God. And there's an internal review, an internal reverence of God himself. It doesn't matter if nobody sees it. A lot of times we look at people and think, well, nobody would know if I did this or I didn't. But God knows. How can I sin against God? Psalm 51, the Bible describes that David in his sin with Bathsheba. He says, against thee and thee only have I sinned. Now I'm thinking, like, wait a second, against God only? Didn't you have Uriah killed? Didn't you break up that marriage? Didn't you try to hide it? I mean, we're talking about a lot of problems here. Against thee only. Now, you also have to think about it. Uriah was put into a place of battle. I wonder if the battle was changed slightly as far as strategy to do something dangerous more so that way Uriah would be killed. I don't know. Which means more people possibly died in that. I'm thinking, David, you sin against a lot of people. But we have to remember, the greatest offense that you commit is against God when you sin. God sees it, and it doesn't matter just that, oh, it's bad. God's offended by it. I mean, we have harmed our relationship with God because of our sin. Internal reverence. Number 4, an intentional resilience. In verse 10, it describes that this happens day by day by day. This is something that happens over and over and over again. It's not just that, like, okay, one time, are you interested? No, okay, on to the next servant. Not like that. She pursues him over and over and over again. When it comes to your temptation, you might say, okay, Pastor, I had great victory. And I've had times, I remember a Sunday school class one time where a friend of mine, I was teaching, we took some prayer requests and praises. And I remember he was sitting there, he was sitting on the side. We had a good full class that day. And anyways, with tears down his eyes, he wanted to give a praise. He said, I want to give God praise because I had victory in Jesus yesterday. God gave me victory over sin. And he was so excited. I mean, he was tearful about how excited he was that he had defeated sin by the power of Christ. He was just so excited by it. About 2 weeks later, he left the state randomly just on a whim to go and have an affair. He had victory in Jesus, and 2 weeks later, he goes and has an affair. I mean, just incredibly sad. But we have to remember that's the nature of sin. When temptation is present, it doesn't mean it's done. Let me encourage you. My desire is not that you go and just badger your spouse, your husband, or your wife about possible sins that have taken place. But it's okay to ask those questions. Listen, have you been pure? Have you been looking at pornography? Has this been something that's been on our computers? Is it okay? Are you hiding things? I mean, go ahead and ask those questions because purity matters that much. Because sin is resilient. It's imperative then that Christians be more resilient. And be intentionally resilient. If you have been tempted by something, then go ahead and set up those safeguards to stay away from those things. And so, this last one is the imperative retreat. In this passage, she catches him, says, lie with me, and his garment's there, he just takes off without it. To him, he'd rather give up his coats than his purity. And so he leaves. And she uses that garment. That's what she ends up using to demonstrate, to prove, aha, see, I got proof Joseph was this bad. And anyways, with this, he not only loses his position, his name seems to be marred, his job is lost, and I'm sure given to somebody else, but then he goes to jail. He goes to prison for years because of this. I mean, a long time. And in all that, he loses a lot. Is sin worth losing out and stuff? I mean, is it okay to lose out on opportunities? I know people, and sadly, I think about this with child rearing, people that would rather have their kid in a sport and fall into immorality just so they don't miss out on something. It's not worth it. I see it, well, I really just want to watch this, so I'm willing to give into this immorality, I'm willing to give into this sinful stuff in my household and the language because I don't want to miss out on that movie. And over and over and over again, we'll see these things that we just want to have. We think it's okay, and God is saying, run from it. Joseph ran away from it. There was nothing wrong. We might say, well, Joseph, you probably should have remembered to grab your coat on the way out. But that's okay. It was worth giving up. You know, I wonder if there's an issue with immorality within your life that you're struggling. Not that you've fallen into. Maybe you have. But if there's a struggle there, is it worth giving up something like giving up a smartphone? I paid $1,000 for the smartphone. Well, it'd be worth giving up, wouldn't it, for your walk with God? Oh, that job is too good, it pays too well, but it's compromising. And you know there's an issue. Oh, Pastor, I can't give it up. Listen, if you're not willing to give up those things, then I know that you don't value your purity enough before God. And what God is telling us here is that we need to run away from those things. Flee those temptations in an imperative retreat. Run away. Get away from those things because our walk with God is worth it. He loses a lot, but we have to remember something. Even when it meant that he went to prison, verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph. Okay, Pastor, I messed up. I look at my life and I fall into temptation. My life, in fact, if I were to look at the past 30 or 40 or 50 or 20 or 12 years of my life, I look more like Judah. I look more like Dinah than Joseph. So what do? Listen, there's still restoration possible for you, but you missed out in the meantime. Judah, back in chapter 38, loses out on something. He loses out on his son having the bloodline of Jesus Christ going through his son. And we know that because his son will not be in the bloodline. In fact, it's going to be literally bypassing. It skips the generation of those three kids, and it's going to be, well, I guess it doesn't skip the generation because his own kid will still be one. But of his other three kids, he loses two of them. And the one that had the opportunity then to have the to bear the bloodline would have been Sheila. He misses out on that because Judah wouldn't do what he was supposed to. He wouldn't get right. He missed out his responsibilities. He didn't run from these things, and instead, because of that, he doesn't. But he does have children, and God uses that for long-term results, where you see the bloodline of Christ preserved through Phares. Now, all of that is to say this, that there is still opportunity for restoration. Part of what we know is that when it comes to what Judah says, that he knew her not again no more. The concept, or he knew her again no more, the concept is not just that he didn't sleep with her anymore as she had acted as a prostitute. That was a one-time action. But then the difference then is in Judah's actions. Judah changes the way he behaves. What does this mean? All the things he was doing, now something's going to change here. And he's going to see the benefit then of two kids that he didn't expect. I don't know how old he is at this point, but he ends up having twins, surprise twins. And anyways, God's going to provide something good. But there had to be that change there. There had to be a realization, I am wrong, and I need to be right with God. And so this is something that's going to take place. If your history is more like chapter 38, if it's more like Judah, then how about you jump over to chapter 39, be like Joseph. In Joseph, you're still going to be in places and circumstances where you have temptation, and those temptations are going to keep coming, and you could immediately today start saying no. You can have that immediate refusal. You can acknowledge, you can identify your responsibility, you can enjoy that internal reverence, that intentional resilience, and that imperative retreat. That is something that you can enjoy today. But as Christians, it's important. We have to. We are not as pure as we should be. The world is stomping Christianity. And we feel like, oh, it's because they're just more powerful. And you know what it is? Because Christians are not powerful enough. We've got too much sin in the way. Way too much sin in the way. Let me encourage your purity. If you're here today and say, okay, well, when it comes to this purity, I don't even know that I'm going to heaven. This is not even possible if the Lord's not with you. You cannot have the Lord with you unless you're saved. You need to know for a fact that He has saved you from all those sins, that He's paid all those sins for you. He did that one way, that Jesus Christ died on the cross, He was buried and rose again. If you would believe on Him, He would save you from all of those, to empower you to be with you. So long as you would obey Him, you'd have that full power access from God. You have that. A sin that cannot ever be taken away. Salvation can never be taken away. He has that for you. Let's go ahead and bow our heads, and we'll close our eyes. We do this so nobody would be looking around for the sake of not embarrassing anybody or making a decision that everybody else is considering. But let me ask you a question. When it comes to your temptation, don't raise your hand. I'm not the one that needs to know this. But when it comes to temptation, are you struggling with temptation today? And I don't know what it is. It could be immorality. Boy, it's everywhere. Maybe something that nobody knows about. Joseph was far away from his homeland. He was in a place of really unquestioned authority in the household. There's nobody else there. The husband's gone. He could do anything he wants. But God's side. Where's your temptation that you're willing to give into? How about we get rid of it? What are those things that we say, I won't give it up? I won't get up because of, hey, how about we remove those to back the priority they ought to have? Let's make those changes today of purity. Let's be a pure church, a pure family. Your children need it. Your family members need it. Your spouse needs it. So be a pure church. And if you're here today and say, I don't know for sure, if I were to die, I'm going to heaven, would you come forward during this time of an altar call here, this time of invitation, and come shake my hand. We'll let you know how you can know for sure you're going to heaven. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for the time you've given. We ask your blessing now in this time of prayer. And as we invite people to make decisions, Lord, they would do so before you and glorify you in the decisions we make. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's go ahead and stand to our feet. We'll have a time of invitation.